Sunday, and it's still 10 minutes after 8. Amazing. Today is Sunday. And on Sunday we do Tanya the first hour. Last week we started Perek Beis. And what I did last week was read a larger piece of the shtikla, of the Tanya, and give you an overview. That's what I did last week. If you were here last week, I showed you that the Alter Rebbe is bringing two different proofs. So the idea of Chelik Elokam Mimal Mamish, one is before the two dots, and the other is after the two dots. Perek Beis. What's the difference between the two proofs? The first proof is really Chassidus, and the second proof is how Chassidus is described through the language, the tzir, through the build of Chachmas HaKabbalah. Before the two dots, the proof was, because it says, Vayipach, Va'apach Nishmas Chaim, the Eibush blew into the nostrils of Adam and Chava, a breath of life. And then it says, Va'ata Machaya es Kulam, that every single Yid is in the same Maimed Umatzir. And the Alter Rebbe says, Man de Nofach, Metechi Nofach, one blows, he blows from his deepest point. After the two dots, the Rebbe wrote a Medrash that says Yisrael olu b'machshava, you didn't enter up the Rebbe's machshava, and the Alter Rebbe explains that machshava means chokhmah. And he sets the stage for the discussion al pi Kabbalah, that Neshamas Yisrael come from chokhmah, and because Neshamas Yisrael come from chokhmah, which is what machshava means, they're a chelik elokam mimal mamish. Now we didn't have an opportunity to develop these ideas. It was very important for me last week to teach you the whole piece, so that you'll see this, that the Alter Rebbe is bringing two different proofs to the idea of Chelik Elokam Mimal. One is a simpler proof, one is a Chassidish proof, an Atzmizdike proof, and the other has a certain tziyur, the Kabbalistic proof, the idea of Chochmah is more developed. After we did this, we started at the beginning again. And we read the first three words, yeah? Perek Beis begins, V'nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael, the second nefesh that a Yid has, he chelik elokam mimal, it's a part of elokus mimal from above, mamish. So the only point that we managed to explain last week was the words v'nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael. The question that we asked last week at the end of the class, in other words, after we did the big picture, after we learned the two positions, was we went back and we read the first point. What's the detach v'nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael? Why is the neshama called shenis? And the nekudas habiyah, the neshama is called shenis not only because agdam et hanisa, because the nefesh habahamis comes first in time. The nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael, the nefesh halakis is called shenis because the nefesh halakis does not fulfill, does not materialize, does not bring out what she is without the nefesh habahamis. It's not for the nefesh habahamis and the yetzer hara and the guf for the ilam hazeh. The neshama would not discover what the neshama is. The neshama is shenis only because before the neshama there's a world and there's a guf and there's nefesh habahamis and there's yetzer hara. Does the neshama realize what the neshama is? Then it says, let's read inside from the beginning. Perek Beis, v'nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael. The second nefesh which a Yid has is Chelik Elokah, is the part of Elokah, godliness, mimal, from above mamish. Now, there's a Hayom Yom that you all know that says Chelik Elokah mimal, ruchnius sheberuchnius, mamish gashmius shebegashmius. If you want to understand what a neshama is, study the four words Chelik Elokah mimal mamish. The first three words, Chelik Elokam Mimal, describe that there's nothing more lofty, nothing more spiritual, nothing more holy, nothing more removed than a neshama. And on the other hand, the neshama is called mamish, gashmius, shebegashmius, because the neshama comes down all the way into a gashmius world. In other words, what makes a neshama unique is not how high its source is. What makes a neshama unique is how infinite it is. That the neshama does not have any kind of limitation. Like we learned yesterday in Shul, the Meraglim understood that everything has a limit, so a neshama also has a limit. And what's the limit of a neshama? If you want a neshama to continue looking like a neshama, keep it in a ruchnizdika world. And the pasuk says in Chassidus students, that's true for a malach, It's true for all kinds of other creations, that they have a certain limitation and they can only be good in a certain environment. What is unique about Neshamas Yisrael? That the Neshama is Chelik Elakam Mimal, Ruchni Sheberuchni, and Mamish is Gashmi Shebegashmi. The ability of the Neshama to be any place and to still be Elokus is rooted in the way the Eibishter created it. Chelik Elakam Mimal and Mamish. So first of all, I just want to tell you that I have here notes. Last time I learned Tanya with you, and also 2 times ago, I learned out of this. This is the Rebbe's Rishimis. I'm still carrying them around, but now I'm learning out of this. And I already explained this to you last week. Somebody made it's supposed to be Tanya Hamavuad. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, wrote a letter over 60 years ago that he's planning to make a Tanya with Mefarshim. And it should look like a Gemara. The Tanya will be in the middle, and the Mefarshim will be around, and there'll be also a column for Madam Akemis. And it never happened. We understand today that when the Rebbe wrote, it's printed in the back of the Tanya. By the way, if you look, and I don't want to make you all nuts, but if you look in your Tanyas on page 338, the second paragraph, it says, Heitzah Tanya Hashlema Shemechinim L'Tfus. There's a perfect, a complete, a whole Tanya that's being prepared for print. The date of this letter is Tafshin Yudalet, 63 years ago, Gimel Kislev. And the Rebbe described what he wants to put into the Tanya. That Tanya was never published. If you had Tamol, that the Mashpiyim complained to the Rebbe, that the Rebbe prints a Tanya Hashlema, no one's going to read Mashpiyim anymore. I don't know. I really don't know if that's true. I really don't think. But we know today that what the Rebbe was talking about was his own Rishimis. Nobody knew the Rebbe had notes on Tanya. The Rebbe has notes on every page of the Tanya, from the very first page to the very last page. The Rebbe wrote a beat on the entire Tanya in his style. And of course it came out in the Rishimis. And the Rishimis also were never finished. They did fill the middle, they did till they get us a tshuva, and then they started. There's a lot of work still to be done in the Rebbe's Rishimis. So somebody decided to give out the Tanya Mavur. It's a compilation of Maimorim and Sichos from all the Rabbeim, and letters from all the Rabbeim, ala Seder Shel Tanya, and they put into this already all the Rebbe's Biyurim and the Rishimis. And I guess on the footnotes in Pinochet, it's a wonderful piece of work. The only problem is it's too much. The number of pages I have to read in anticipating of what I'm going to teach in a particular Sunday is much more than I have time for. It's a gval, it's a sach. But it's beautiful to see. It's something that the Rebbe wanted. I mean, I would like it to look more like a Gemara than it looks. It's a typical page. It doesn't look like a Gemara, exactly, right? Because for every word of Tanya, there's 2 pages of notes. But okay, criticism, there's a whole committee of people whose neshamas came into this world to do nothing except criticize. Upon him, ich habe an andere Schlichtes in der Welt, so I'll leave, thank God. So I'll leave the criticism to the experts. Weißt du, the mice that come all the child by Fabrengen, that a Yid passed away and he came to Mailo, and the Eibusher says, what's your strength? He says, I'm a Talmud Chacham. Yeah. Oh, da got nice. He says, no, I'm a special kind of Chacham. My Indian is up to fragen was jener erzählt, to dispute it. So the Eibusher says to him, no, I got the Kutsche Brichel, ich will abschlagen. The Eibusher should tell me something, I'll show that he's wrong. Ich will abschlagen. Okay, so but okay, so this is what I'm learning out of. So there's a letter from the Friedrich Rebbe that he brings on here, where the Friedrich Rebbe says that this idea that the words Chelik HaMimal is Ruchnis Sheberuchnis and Mamish is Gashmis Shebegashmis, they don't leave it close. Because specifically in the words Chelik Elakah you have 2 opposites, and in the words Mimal and Mamish you also have 2 opposites. In other words, the 4 words Chelik Elakah, Mimal, Mamish in general connote opposites, and specific they note twice. Chelik shows on a more limited thing, Elakah shows something which is unlimited, Mimal shows on something which is unlimited, and Mamish shows on something which is Matthias. So it's so to speak Klolos Pratis. In general, Chelik Elakah Mimal is Ruchnis Sheberuchnis, and Mamish is Gashmis Shebegashmis, but more specifically, Chelik and Elakah is a dichotomy, and Mimal Mamish is again a dichotomy. Okay, but I don't want to go into these details because I don't want to go into these details. It's too technical. it's not the gain of Tanya, but what is the gain of Tanya to understand is, it says in Rishonim, in some Rishonim at least, that a malach cannot come into a guf gashmi. A malach cannot come into a physical body. It's not only that a malach can come into a guf gashmi, because you're going to have the problems of Sham Chazoi and Azohel, right? We had it last week's Pasha and Rashi, that these malachim who saw the people in the generation of the Mabul doing Avedis, and the malachim said to the Eibishter, you know what? Get rid of all these chevre and give us the world and give us the Torah. And the Eibishter says to these malachim, you don't know what they're up against. If you knew their nisyanis, you wouldn't be such a rush to take their place. The malachim said, sure! So the Eibishter dropped them from heaven to earth, and they were machadish whole new madregas of perversion and sickness to the already corrupt world, and that's part of what happened for the Mabul. So they come with malachim from Himmel, and instead of acting like malachim from Himmel, they acted like chayas from the earth, worse than the shoyim. You understand? But there's a malach. So one idea that a malach can come into a guf is you put a malach into a guf, and he's always malach. But it says in somebody's shayim that a malach can come into a guf because they can't meet. The malach is too ruchniyazik, and the guf is too gashmizik, and there's no way it can happen. Which is why, to give you an extreme example, a very extreme example, the Rambam holds that the whole story of the three malachim that visited Avram Avinu, remember that story? And they went to Stoim, and they turned over Stoim, and they got Tzadichas HaSipur. The Rambam writes the entire thing never happened. It never happened. It was a vision. The whole thing was a nevuah. They said the Rambam. And the Ramban gets crazy. The Ramban gets angry at the Rambam on occasion, but this is Ramban Vikemeret Nazeh, yeah? The Rambam writes that the story with the donkey never happened in Bashas Balak. There was a vision. That Bilam saw a vision of his donkey talking about and then he saw the Malach, and the Malach had a Charbe Shlufa B'Yadeh. This position in Rambam is not based chas v'sholem like Apakursim want to say the Eibishter can't make nisim me'ala teva. It's a limitation in a malach. The Rambam holds it's impossible a malach to come into a guf. Can't put on a neshama malach into a guf. Obviously we disagree, because we learn in Mikra Yeitim Edei Pshutei that the malachim were mislabish in the gufas of people, and there's even a possibility v'hu eimed aleim tachas ha'etz v'yechelu, that the malachim, because they were in a guf, azas lekarta halak b'nimusa, were eating the food. Remember, they were eating the matzah and the behemoths that he fed them, the shaynas b'chadl and so on. But the point is, the very fact that there is such an argument gives you an idea that when you talk about dvarim ruchniim, just like physical things have limitations, spiritual things have limitations as well. And sometimes the limitation is that it can't go above a certain madrega, obviously, and sometimes the limitation is it can't go below a certain madrega. When it comes to a neshama, you should know what's the definition of a neshama. What's unique about neshama is itself, and there is nothing like it. Nothing like it in the entire Bria. The Eibishter made a being that, even though it represents the highest of the high, is not constrained, is not prevented from coming down to the lowest level, to the lowest world, into a guf. And of course, when you put a neshama into a guf, the chiddush is not that the neshama is in a guf. The chiddush is that in spite of the fact that the neshama is in a guf, you see neshama, you don't see guf. The neshama comes into this world and lives in a life that's not reflective of the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not reflective of the spirituality of a neshama. So, okay, maybe the neshama is technically here, but the neshama is defeated by this world. The pshat, chelik elakam imal mamish, is that the neshama can come into this world, be given the most impossible odds, and reveal its alakus. That's the taich. Chelik elakam imal ruchnis shabaruchnis. Mamish, gashmi shabagashmi, is the holiest neshama, can be put into the worst situation in the lowest world, and be what it is. Chelik elakam imal. That's unique to neshama itself. This is what's special about a Yiddish neshama. And of course, the haskalah shabadavar, the lomdis, is that when you talk about neshamas, there's a classic sugi in Chassidus. Now the word classic is so overused that it's become totally unclassic. But in this case, it's true. There's a sugi in Chassidus which is really a classic sugi. And you have it in a lot of places in Chassidus. You have it in Anat, you have it in Samach Hey, you have it in other places that Rebbe spoke about it an awful lot, including Toshin and Beis, told it, and Oid, Sachplatz. And the Nekuda of this sugya is the interface, the comparison and the difference between Torah and Neshamas Yisrael. Between Torah and Neshamas Yisrael. And the way the sugya begins with a medrash. That the medrash of the Yohanavi says in a medrash. Yohanavi says that it's based on a rayat ma'posuk and so on. There's shnei dvarim shenivru keidim lo'elam. There's two things that Hashem created first before the Eibush created anything else. He created two things. What are those two things? Torah and Neshamas Yisrael, Torah and Yidden. Like it says, Bereishis, Beis Reishis. B'shul Yisrael, b'shul HaTorah. And Yohanavi says, and we don't know, mi kodem l'mi. If the Eibush created both Torah and Neshamas Yisrael, the question becomes, which one came first? Did the Torah come first or did the Neshama come? And then Yohanavi says, I couldn't find an answer to this question until I opened the Torah. And I look in the Torah, it says in the Torah, Dabar Adasham Meshal Emet. Dabar Bnei Yisrael. Savas Bnei Yisrael. And made of Bnei Yisrael. The whole Torah is spoken to the Jewish people. So Yohanavi finishes the Medrash by saying, Oimer Ani, it is my opinion that Machshavtam Shei Yisrael Kodma L'chol Davar, the thought of the Jewish people comes before everything. Afilu L'machshavas HaTorah, even to the thought of the Torah. Yidden are higher than everything. Right? B'mi Nimlach, but the Shmesayim Shal Stik, we had a recent thing in a Maimed that we learned. That the first thing the Eibush created, before he created anything else, including the Torah, is Neshamas Yisrael. So in conjunction with this, there's a discussion about Torah and Neshamas. And the discussion goes like this. Torah and Neshamas Yisrael are opposite in every imaginable way. When it comes to Torah, there's two basic mishalim, two basic forms that are used to describe what the Torah is. One form is the Torah Oyer. Torah is the light of Hashem. Oyer, the light of the Eibush. The Oyer, Ein Seif, this is Torah. Torah is a reflection of the Eibush. Whatever the Eibush is reflected in the Torah. And the second idea is that Torah is Chochmah Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is the light of the Eibush, and Torah is the wisdom of the Eibush. And of course, how could you have two? Pnimius HaTorah is Oyer, Chitzonius HaTorah is Chochmah. But of course, since you're talking about Torah and Alakus, the Chochmah, the Pnimius and the Chitzonius, the Chochmah and the Eira are connected. There's a long story. But Torah is the light of the Eibush and the wisdom of the Eibush. What do these two ideas have in common? What do light and wisdom share in context? And the answer is, when you look at light, you know the source of the light. That's the very definition of that it's Me'ein Amor. It's reflecting its source, it's revealing its source. And Chochmah is the same thing. When you study ideas of a big Chacham, you learn something about the character of the Chacham who created those ideas. Every person leaves an imprint of what he is in Ma'aseh Yadav, in what he does. The Eibishter's Chochmah reveals what the Eibishter is. In the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you could see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Based on the famous Mashal, the word from the Litcher Maggid, which is brought from Mabarech Chassidus. The Litcher Maggid looked at a bowl, a klicheres, a bowl on his table. And he said that the person who made this bowl is Suma B'ayin Afas. Is blind on one eye. And he was true. So the Maimonides Chassidus said, how did the Maggid look at a bowl and know that the person who made it was Suma B'ayin Afas? There's a number of different biyudim which are Sasam Zeh. But the simple one is, you could see from the way it was shaped that the person who did it was doing it, looking at it in a strange way. He was able to see from the design that he probably could even tell you which eye he could see at, based on how it was curved. I don't understand these things, but it's Pashat from Chochmah. This is a cloud. That there's always such a thing called Keach HaPel B'Nifel. When you do something in this world, you leave clues as to who you are. Every person's actions reflect the one who did the pro-action, your personality. So Klayochal, in the Eibishter's Chochmah, you can see the Eibishter himself. What's the downside of Oyer? And what's the downside of Chochmah? Oyer reflects the Eibishter, reveals the Eibishter. Chochmah in its way also reveals the Eibishter, but it is not the Eibishter. It is only the light. It is only the wisdom. In other words, on the one hand, the light reflects everything that Atmos and Hus, everything that Hashem is. But on the other hand, the light that says is the Lashon Tanya Ha'ara. It's a reflection, like a photograph. A photograph of a person looks exactly like the person, but it's not the person at all. The light of a person looks exactly like the person, but it's not the person at all. The light of Atmos and Hus and Tzavah, the Eibishter Koyachol, is exactly like the Eibishter, but it's not the Eibishter at all. What about Neshamis? It's exactly the same thing backwards. There's also two Mishalim to describe the relationship to Neshamis and the Eibishter, but they're equal and opposite. Number one, that Neshamis Yisrael are called Hashem's children. And number two, that Neshamis Yisrael are called Hashem's chosen ones. The Eibishter selected us. Hashem chose us with free will, with freedom. What do we know about children? What do we know about children? What do we know? Anybody know anything about children? Anybody have any idea anything about children? Well, the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and the reason you got old. That's why I have a friend. I mean, we were already marrying off children. Baruch Hashem, I met a friend with one of his younger kids. Came in for his bar mitzvah, his aliyah. So, versteht sich? I'm young enough to tell my friend, we're old. When I'm going to be 70, I'm not going to say it so freely. Now I'm old. Why? The machine arbeitet a Weile. Everything is working. So I say to him, this is one of his youngest children. Not his youngest, one of his youngest children. He said, give my son a bracha. I said, give him a bracha. The boy was interested in my brachas. I'm interested in going on Mars. So the boy was not listening. So I said to him, I want you to know, Bill Gates, doesn't have verstanden, said once in his speech to high school students, your parents were not born geeks. They became that way raising you. Your children were not always yuckles and nebachs and slowpokes, and they don't want to have fun. All they want to do is things should be normal. That happened because they took care of children. Anyway, whatever it is, you give your whole life to your kids. Yeah, and it's the greatest thing and the greatest insight. I don't know what's harder, to have children or to be married. This is the two most difficult things. And by the way, there's no chinuch, there's no adracha, there's no yeshiva, there's no nothing. The two most difficult things you do in your life, you have to learn from where? From your home. Either you do what your parents did, or you do pum fakert. It's alles Probleme. Okay, aber es ist gesunde Problem mit Neibishnis. But okay, children don't necessarily reflect their parents. We know what the Rimtzi is. Children oftentimes reflect exactly the opposite of what their parents are. And even if children do reflect their parents, they're not reflecting their parents because of their parents. They're reflecting their parents because of themselves. It becomes theirs. Why? Because children are not meant to be like a light, which is a reflection of a source. Children are meant to be, again, what the parents are. In the Lashon HaChasidus, parents put into their children their very essence. Their essence. Parents put into their children their essence. What's the essence of a person? The essence of a person is that he owns himself. The essence of a person is, I have no balabas. I belong to me. So you have a father and a mother. The father belongs to the father. The mother belongs to the mother. I think I mentioned this to you last week also in the class. That even though a man marries a woman, but in order for a man to marry a woman, the woman has to first own herself. To be able to consent to be married to that man. So a man owns himself, a woman marries herself, and they bring children into the world, and what do they give the children? That the children don't belong to the parents, the children belong to themselves. And that's the greatest nachas that parents have. The greatest nachas is that the children don't grow up being little puppies. The biggest kalikid, the biggest cripple that could be, God forbid, if children grow up and they hold on to the apron. The whole idea is, in today's day and age, it has to be done through revolution and rebellion, and my parents are no good. Because the world is so sophisticated, enlightened, and modern, that every thought and every emotion that ever passed across your subconscious, that right? We have to say everything has to come out. But that's what children are. They take from their parents the deepest thing that their parents have. And what is that? That their parents got from their parents, before them. That they shouldn't be connected to their parents, but that they should be entities unto themselves. And this is what parents pass along to their children. How do you give your child the ability to be separate from you? And the only answer that's found in Chassidus is because you give them etzem. Etzem. Whatever the etzem translated in English is essence. I'm not sure what essence means, but this is what parents pass along to their children, their essence. What is the essence of the parent? That the center of the parent is the parent himself, not their parents. and their parents' parents. This is what a human being is. This is what a neshama is. It's coming from the Eibishter, and it's the Eibishter's child. He's not the Eibishter's light, which reflects the Eibishter and is a perfect copy of the Eibishter and very well behaved. He's not the Eibishter's wisdom, where you look at the Seichel and you know who the Baal Seichel was. He's the Eibishter's Akind. And if he or she is going to look like the Eibishter looks, it's not going to be because they're the child of the Eibishter, but because they made themselves look like the Eibishter. Because the Eibishter gives a Yiddish kid, a Jewish person, a Yiddish neshama, a chelik, a piece of the essence. And the Rebbe brings in his notes, chelik, kesh at the tefes bechelki, at the tefes b'mektas. When you etzim, kesh at the tefes bechelki, at the tefes b'mektas. Right? There's something called an essence, an etzem. It's very, very difficult to translate that word essence. Very hard to understand what the word means precisely. But we use the word essence in English. I don't like the word because I don't think it's very helpful. But whatever essence means, if you split an essence in half, you have two essences. If you split an essence into a million pieces, you have a million essences. Because it's not kamos. There's no such thing as quantity when it comes to an essence. It's either the whole thing or it's none of it at all. So when you split an essence, it's like a catalyst. You know, I don't know anything about catalysts, but it's been explained to me, and I think I once looked it up online also. A catalyst is something that has an effect. Like you want to make yogurt, you have to have a starter to make yogurt. But the amount of starter you need to make yogurt has nothing to do with how much yogurt you want to make. Whether you're making a cup, or you're making a gallon, or you're making a vat, you don't need, the kamos is the same. Or if you have something that's a preservative, it's protecting something from spoiling, it's called a catalyst. Kamos nitmigay, it doesn't matter how much, it just matters that you have it. And a shom is an etzem. And an etzem, when you split it in half, you have two complete essence. You split it into a million pieces. This is what parents give children. They give their parent, their child, their essence. And therefore, when a child grows up, the child is absolutely not his father's. Absolutely not his mother's. The child belongs to the child. That's how it is. That's how it works. Anyway, this is the first definition of a neshama. The first definition of a neshama is that he's a child of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean that a Yiddish neshama is a child of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that doesn't reflect the Eibishter? It's a copy of the Eibishter. The Eibishter takes his essence and he gives it to every Yid. Now that doesn't mean we could fly, and that doesn't mean we could create worlds. It doesn't mean that we could chleis nitvos. It means that we have the ability to be a shutav l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'maaseh bereishis. The Eibishter put into us the ability to be his partners in the creation of the world. You want to hear a radical Torah? You know what you want to means that you're going to hear it whether you want or you don't want to. Yes, I might as well tell it to you. Yeah, it's a fantastic sefer for Rebbe Nishma Tafresh Menvav Menun. That's called. And in this sefer, there's a section of Rishimis. The Rebbe Rashab was first becoming a Rebbe, and he wrote Maimorim. Some he didn't write that many, and he also wrote notes on Chassidus in his own learning. And you have these notes; they published these notes. And amongst these notes, there's a section of notes, not that many pages, but on the Sefer HaIkrim. Sefer HaIkrim is a classic Sefer of Chakira, of Jewish philosophy. And the Rebbe Rashab wrote notes on Sefer HaIkrim. Amongst the notes on Sefer HaIkrim, there's a Meshuggah Nemaisa, Mamsh, a radical story. That Apokadis came to the Tzemach Tzedek, a reformer, a smart guy. And he came to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said to the Tzemach Tzedek, can the Eibishter create noch an Eibishter? This was the question. Can God create another God? So that Aneg Silki Valte Valte B'Divrei Torah, the Tzemach Tzedek answered him. Not the Eibishter could make another God, he made it. This wasn't the answer this guy was expecting. He wanted to have an argument. He's making it easy for him. It says in Medrash, on the Pasuk, and Rashi brings it in Chumash, Vayikra Loi Keil Lekei Yisrael. It's in Pashas Vayishlach. Yankov Avinu built a Mizbeach, and he called Loi to the Mizbeach Keil Lekei Yisrael. But Yankov called the Mizbeach Keil. God is a Lekei Yisrael, the God of Israel, the God of the Jewish people. Then he wrote it. Said it, yeah. Shaitan Medrash Meram Lamed Vayikra Loi Keil, that the Eibishter called Yankov Avinu Lekei Yisrael. Malamed Shekoda Kadosh Baruch Hu Yankov Keil. The Eibishter called Yankov Avinu God. Now he's supposed to get very nervous now. He's supposed to get very nervous and get really fidgety. Yeah. What's the Devar? The Devar is that the Eibishter is Beirei Elamis. The Eibishter is about Bechira, who makes the difference in Eibishter's world. We can't do what the Eibishter does, but we have free will. And because we have free will, we can do something Kfayochel for the Eibishter. And doing this for the Eibishter, we become Kfayochel partners with the Eibishter. However you resolve the questions of Achas Hashem and a Yid's Bechira, but this is the Pshat, a child. A child is exactly like his parent. And what is his parent? An entity that truly is in possession of himself. And because he's truly in possession of himself, so the word that we use always, he's free to do what he wants. He's free to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a Yid is different. A Yid is different than the Torah. The Eid of the Eibishter, the Chochmah of the Eibishter reflects the Eibishter, but its whole mitzvah is that it's reflecting the Eibishter. A Yid may not look like the Eibishter. If a cat, it may look pretty bad, yeah. But inside of him is the Eibishter, and a Madrege, that he's a copy. He has Bechira Chavshis, he has free will to be able to serve the Eibishter. Now I'm going to be Makatza. I don't want to be Meidich in this, but the Maimonic Chassidus explained the difference between the idea that we're the Eibishter's children and that we're the idea that the Eibishter's chosen ones. And what's the difference? So technically the difference is that we're the Eibishter's children from the level of the Neshama. We're the Eibishter's chosen ones from the level of the Guf and the Nefesh Habamis, the Stama. Why? The Neshama is the Eibishter's child, just like children and parents. Children and parents may be independent. Healthy child rearing means that you create a child that should be separate from you and independent from you and so on. But the personality, the character is similar. Children have a similar character, personality to their parents. In other words, even though the love of parents to children is based on nothing other than the fact that the child is literally a piece of the parent. That's the Mitzvah Advarim. The child is literally a piece of the parent. The child is literally a piece of the parent. But there's also an explanation to the love. Loving the child is loving yourself because they're in your image. Now, the problem with people of our generation is that we have a very, very specialty. It's called self-hatred. I don't like this about myself. I don't like that myself. And all of the ugly things that we hate about ourselves, we see in our children in an unabashed way. The kids are not smart enough to hide it. So we hate our kids because we hate ourselves. But this is American. This is Paltiel. It's unique to our times. But the fact is that you love your child, first of all, because the child is a piece of you, and because your child is exactly like you. That's the Mitzvah of them. Your child is exactly like you. I had a grandmother, she passed away recently, who said about my oldest son, that he's more like me than I am. You have to know my grandmother now, she operated, said, she's more like me than I am, which is Havard. It's Havard, because after them is Bain and children are more like their parents and their parents in many cases. So there's also a basis for the love. You can't call it a seichel basis, but there's a basis. But bechira, choice means it's lak mitad habecha v'lo mitad hanivcha klal. There's nothing special about a Yiddish group. There's nothing special about Yiddish and nefesh habamis Eibishter chosen. And b'meila, this is the true atzmos. The true atzmos means it's not only the pshat that the Eibishter loves a Yid, because the Yid is in the character of the Eibishter, just like a parent loves the child, because the child is in the character of the parent. Here there's no character, there's nothing, it's a lump of clay. The Shvat Shlag Zogen, azudik ezak mit fleish and beine, a boiling sack of meat and bones. And the Eibishter loves this, bechira. So this is what a neshama is. A neshama is the Eibishter's child, and the neshama is the Eibishter's chosen one, and in certain aspects, the idea that the Eibishter chose us is even deeper than the fact that we're the Eibishter's child. So this is the Hagdom, this is an introduction. Right? I don't know how it took me, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. The point of this introduction is that we juxtaposed, we compared and contrasted a classic idea. This is really a classic idea in Chassidus. And that is that Torah is Oyed and Chochmah. It's close to Hashem, but it's not at all Hashem, it's just a reflection. And the Neshamas Yisrael are children, and the chosen ones, they're far from the Eibishter. They could even be against the Eibishter. They could rebel against the Eibishter if they chose to, and they have a piece of the Eibishter inside of themselves. Mamish. What is the point in context? The point in context is because a Yid has inside of himself a piece of the Eibishter, just like the Eibishter has no limits, a Yid has no limits. As the Rebbe would often say, by Fabrengenischen, the Eibishter is nimna and noise. Hashem can do opposites. So a Yid can do opposites. The Eibishter put into the koyach of a Yiddish neshama no limits. And of course, one of the simplest symptoms of this no limit, you take in his neshama, you put it into a guf, in Eilam Hazeh Agashmi V'Achumri, and he's still Elokus. He still reflects and reveals that he's a Chedek HaKavim Ma'amam. This is an amazing thing. You take a neshama, you put him into Eilam Hazeh. I was talking about this on Friday in the Maimon class. The Alter Rebbe laments. Alter Rebbe Poshet laments. Klokt. Lo Ma'asa Hashem Kocha. You have it twice in the Tanya. Once is in chapter 31, in Perek Lamed Aleph. And then again in the beginning of Perek Lamed Hey, chapter 35, Lamed Hey. What is this? The Eibusha takes an neshama, which is the Chelik L'Kam Mima'al Mamish, and puts him into an environment where he will certainly fail. Certainly fail. I'll read you the words. Dafnish Leim Mavuvot. This is the beginning of Perek Lamed Hey, and like I said, they have similar oasis in Perek Lamed Aleph. The Alter Rebbe writes like this: Me'acha shelo yuchlu l'shalcha kol yomeim. He is never going to get rid of his Yetzer Hara. U'litcheisam b'mekema, to push it out of her place, mecholol ha'smali, from the left side of the heart. Im kein, I'm skipping a bunch of words. Lama zeh yodu nishmiseyem le'elam hazeh. Why bring the neshamas into this world? Lega la rik chas v'shalom, to toil futilely, fargodish, for nothing, their whole life. Lehilachem kol yomeim im yeyetzer, to spend their entire life fighting with the Yetzer Hara. V'la yochlu, they're never going to win. And Alter Rebbe says it. The Tom, the Trop, is Eira Bitter. They was protesting. I don't understand. What kind of game is it? What are you doing? And here you have on page 80, this is Perek Lamed Aleph, similar issues. Lama asa Hashem kazais. I'm reading Pashat words from Tanya. Why would the Eibusha do this? Leheidid chelek be'eira yizbarach, to make a piece of his life. I'm 5 lines from the bottom of page 80. Ve'el bisheni, encloses it b'mishcha dechivya tipas rucha, in the skin of a snake and a putrid drop. Doesn't make any sense. And the Alter Rebbe's answer in both places is because this is the Chiddush of a neshama. This is the Chiddush of a neshama. The Chiddush of a neshama is that the Eibusha makes it impossible. And success, the way we think should success be, we never achieve. But from the Eibusha's perspective, there could be no greater ness than a Yid in Eilam Hazeh, in our generation, and the Ikvis and the Mashiach. I don't know how many times they say the word Akvayim, and we don't like how we look. The Eibusha loves how we look. Why? Because the Pele is not that the Neshama is Elokuz. The Pele is that the Neshama is Elokuz against impossible odds. Against impossible odds. Against impossible odds. You know, there's a story. It was a big argument, or not big argument, but a discussion. An argument diplomatically is a discussion with the Kapishnitzer Rebbe. The Kapishnitzer Rebbe was the father-in-law of Reb Zalman Garari, and the Rebbe wanted Reb Zalman Garari should be rich, and the Kapishnitzer Rebbe didn't want he should be rich. And the argument went on for a long time. It's an interesting story. Some of the details of the story are published. You can read the story. But the Rebbe once sat opposite him. By Shiva. He was sitting Shiva, the Kapishnitzer Rebbe, and the Rebbe came to Menachem Ovel, and the Rebbe says to him, I want you should agree with me, you should be rich. So the Kapishnitzer Rebbe says, I'm afraid. Wealth is the big Nisayan. So the Rebbe answers him, as we always used to hear the Rebbe saying, you didn't have to struggle. Let at least be comfortable. It's an ayah that had. Jews were always afraid of wealth. It's based on the Alter Rebbe. This is brought from Chassidim. The Alter Rebbe said, at Gewalt Ois Poelen, he wanted to influence Lamaila, that all of his descendants should be from till Mashiach comes, and they told him not going to happen. Alter Rebbe. Hat Alter Rebbe gesagt, ich habe gepeilt, as in some others I know them alike, that none of them should be rich. Now, you know any rich nations? But this is a story that the Alter Rebbe said. Again, it's brought from Chassidim. This is not the Frierdiker Rebbe's Rishim, it's brought from Chassidim. The Rebbe wanted Oyster Poelen to affect that all of his descendants should be from, and he saw Mulmaila, it's not happening. Think about it, the Rebbe should be told that not all of his descendants should be from. It's mind-blowing. So at least at the Gepel, the line Odom. Why? Because how frei can you be if you're broke? Huh? If you have a lot of money, we are facing what? A Golus. What? Baruch Hashem. The poor people are not poor. It's a very different world. And the Nishanis that we have are unprecedented. And the Alamas Vestadim that we face are equally unprecedented. And what's the Eibishter's kick? Where's Mashiach? I mean, that it doesn't make sense where Mashiach is. And the Rebbe says there's one requirement. You have to say, I don't like it. And you just say, I don't like it. I want to get out of here. But from the Eibishter's perspective, the Eibishter looks at us. What does he have? Grace Lomdim, Grace Chsidim, Grace Yedei Shamayim. He has Yidden doing mitzvahs against the most impossible odds. And for the Eibishter, that's a Chiddush. Where do you see Chelek Elakami Mal, Mamish? Chelek Elakami Mal, Ruchnius Sheberuchnius. Mamish, Gashmius Shebegashmius. You see it more now than ever. Ever. A Yid who's totally assimilated. And he's not broken, and he's not poor, and he's not hungry, and his neshama wakes up and he wants to do a mitzvah. It's a double ploy. It doesn't make sense. But this reveals the dichotomy, the paradox of Chelek Elakami Mal Mamish a lot more than a Yid who lived in a shtetl in Poland and sat a whole day in a shtibel and learned Torah. Because you have a lot of Chelek Elakami Mal. There's not so much Mamish. Now you have a lot of Mamish. Und von deswegen, nevertheless, that's the Teich. Chelek Elakami Mal Mamish, Ruchnis, Shaberuchnis, and Gashmi Gashmis. You know why? Because the idea that a Yid serves the Eibishter is not something that he does. It's what he is. You can change you can't change your stripe, your spots or your stripes, yeah? But you can change your shirt. But you can't change what you are. A lakus to a Yid is what he is. And therefore, even when a Yid is in the ultimate state of mamish, sooner or later, in one way or another, the Chelek Elakami Mal has to show itself. Because this is what he is. And this is what the Eibishter created. Chelek Elakami Mal, Ruchnius Sheberuchnius, Mamish, Gashmius Shebegashmius. This is what a Yid is. This is what a Yid is. That's what the Eibishter Bashaf. So the Eibishter could have had Malachim Hayla, who do extraordinary things. The Eibishter, the Alter Rebbe says, Tanya Perek Mevav, Hiniach, Eibishter ignores the Malachim, and ignores the Sonim Al Yenim, and ignores the Netzolim, and the Maitzil, all the grace of Zachen, and what's he busy with us? Why? Because this is the wonder, this is the pen, this is what the Eibishter created. A Neshama Baguf, Chelek Elakah, Mimal, Ruchnis Sheberuchnis, Mamish, Gashmish Shebegashmis. This is what the Eibishter wants from his creation, that in the most ungodly place, the Eibishter is present. That presence is a Yid, is a Neshama Baguf. Chelek Elakah Mimal, Mamish. And the only way this is possible is because a Jew is not a creation of the Eibishter, he's a piece of the Eibishter. He's a child of the Eibishter. The Yid's deepest personality, the essence of a Yid's neshama is, now he's not doing Judaism, he is Judaism. Thus is it, he's a piece of the Eibishter, this is what he does. Safe, call safe, he has to reveal what the Eibishter is. I don't know if you know this. There's a woman who comes here during the week, a young lady, she's Shlomo Schwartz's daughter. You know, Shlomo Schwartz passed away with the shliach of the Rebbe in California, UCLA, and so on. Shlomo Schwartz, one of our shlichus, I don't know, 45 years ago. He passed away relatively young. I don't know if he was 70. And Shlomo Schwartz was famous for his suspenders and his funny clothes and his funny hat. He didn't walk around with a hat and a sutuk like a square lababcha. Shlomo Schwartz was makar thousands of people. Bli Guzman. Shlomo Schwartz's goal in life was that a Jew should marry a Jew. This is what he dedicated himself to. And they say he made 600 chasanas, which is an awful lot of chasanas. 600 chasanas. We're not talking Shemei Teru Mitzvah. People, the only Indian of Yiddishkeit that they preserved or observed is that they married a Jew. And then with that Anglik and Gan Neshama, so his daughter, they sat Shiva, he passed away, and she came afterwards, and I also saw they had a Shleishim event that they spoke, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I learned from this was that as funny as Shlomo looked, he was very, very old-fashioned. He wasn't modern, and he wasn't cool, and he wasn't enlightened. He said it the way it was. When he taught Chassidus, it was the way Chassidus is supposed to be taught, like it says in Maimon. He looked worldly, but he wasn't worldly at all. If you listen to what he spoke, and how he spoke, and what he did to inspire people, he was very old-fashioned. And one of the things that his children quoted, Bishmoy, which is the ultimate symptom of being old-fashioned, was that when he talked to people about intermarriage, which is what he did for a living, this is what he did. You want to become frum, there's plenty of shluch make you frum. I want you to marry Jewish, that's all I want. This was his goal in life. He did it as a shliach under Reb Shlomo Kunin, then he became his own Metzias. He had his own program, which now his children are continuing, and so on. So when he would talk to people about intermarriage, what would he say? A Jew and a Goy get married, it's a bad match. Because their personality is different. Personality of a Jew, personality of a non-Jew clash. And sooner or later it'll burn itself up. Now I remember Midrash Secured Tzaddik, when I was in Bochum in California, there was a Jewish journal, a reform paper. And they had a whole op-ed, 4 pages, a long Grenza Megillah, showing how intermarriage makes sense psychologically. Because Jewish girls are very strong. A Jewish men are very opinionated. A Jewish man, a Jewish woman is terrible. Oh, you marry an Italian, a whole hezbid, what intermarriage makes sense. This is a Jewish paper explaining Ufgeklärtkeit to the extreme. Now, what makes me Jewish? That I'm learning 101 ways to hate myself. And the Rebbe says it's exactly the opposite. A Jew marries a Jew, it's as a match, they're the same nature. A Jew marries a non-Jew, it's a different nature, different personality, and sooner or later it plucks. And I told this to you recently because I was talking a lot about the 6-Day War. You remember during the week or two ago I was talking about the 6-Day War. I'm still doing it with the men every week. We're going to learn the sikhs of the Rebbe when we get to the 6-Day War, and I'm putting them online if you're interested. After the 6-Day War, there was a spike, a huge increase in divorce amongst intermarried couples. Yidnu married Goyim, Rahman al-Tan. Now 50 years ago, intermarriage was not at all what it is today. The numbers today are model, 60, 70%, mamish. In those days it was 10 or 50. The number of Yidden who didn't have a conscience of marrying Jewish because their father or mother threatened it with the cup, hacking the cup. It was a different world, but there was still intermarriage. And then there was a huge spike. Why? Because a Goy is married to this Jewish girl living in Alabama or in Dakota or in Wyoming or in Hawaii or in South America, and they're totally secular. They have nothing to do with anything. And then there's a little tiny country 10,000 miles away in Asia Minor where Arabs and Jews have a conflict and their spouse can't sleep. What do you care? What do you have to do with them? And couldn't sleep like it was if it was something happened to a brother or a sister. And they came to the conclusion that they simply do not know the person who they married. And it dissolved the marriage. They lost whatever it was that brought them together was not sufficient to hold them together. Because what was revealed is the difference in the personality between a Yid and a non-Yid. The personality of a Yid is he doesn't do Yiddishkeit. He doesn't serve the Eibishter. He's a representative. He's a presence of Atmos and Hussein Sobarach in this world that shows itself in his free will, and it shows itself in its unstoppability. In the deepest darkness, the star of a Yiddish neshama will shine. Fakeh. When it's dark enough, it shines more brightly than at any other time. Like the Rebbe says in the Mamorim that he spoke to the 6-Day War. It's a very, very unusual creation that the Eibishter made. So Shlomo, when he talked to people at intermarriage, what's the big word in the marriages today? I'm in love. The more you learn about it, the sadder that word becomes, the more empty that word is. But when you're 25 or 23 or even 31, love seems to be mechap al kol pshoim. Yeah? And he says, you think you're in love. This can't work. A Yid and a Goy cannot be married. They're two creations, different beasts. And this is what he told Freie people. And he told it with such an emes, with such a sincerity, that in many cases he convinced them that the Jew should marry a Jew, and the Goy should, like the Rebbe writes in letters, if you truly love this person, you won't marry them. If you really care about that person, you won't marry them because you're going to be hurting them and hurting yourself and hurting the children that you're going to bring from this union. A Yid has to marry a Yid, and a non-Yid has to marry a non-Yid because they have different personalities on a basic level. Because a Yid is a chelik alakami ma'aman. It doesn't look that way. Just like not all children look like their parents, yeah? Certainly not the way the parents think they're supposed to look like them. Like I said, our children look like us, and only ugly parts of ourselves. The nice parts of ourselves seem to have been lost, yeah? Or perhaps the nice parts of ourselves in them are not so nice, and it doesn't look, we look at a shtickle mirror, but that's what children are. They're a piece of their parents. And that's such chelik alakami ma'aman. So to summarize and to finish the class, last week I explained why the neshama is called nefesh hashenis. And what did I say? And again, I'm not making it up, I'm taking it from here. That nefesh hashenis is what a neshama is not discovered unless there's a rishon. You don't know. The neshama itself doesn't know what the neshama is unless it's sheni. What comes first? The nefesh habamis in the guf. Why? Because what a neshama is not revealed when the neshama is in Gan Eden and was in Yel B'Sal Yenim and one with Atam Samhus. When the neshama discovers what a neshama is when she is Shenis. In other words, the Chelik Elakami Ma'al part, the neshama may know in Gan Eden. The truth is, even that it doesn't know. But the mamish, that it continues to be a Chelik Elakami Ma'al, even when it's mamish, you only discover when there is inyan of mamish. And I don't know when we're going to learn Tanya next, because now goes a period of concentrated in Yonim. First of all, there's Gimel Tammuz. So we, at a certain point, I have to figure out exactly when. I have to talk to Ariel. We have to decide when we're going to go to Gimel Tammuz. For sure, by Sunday next, we're going to be doing Gimel Tammuz. Maybe we'll learn Tanya. Maybe we won't learn Tanya. The way it stands now, I should be here next Sunday, but there's a lot going on in my life that I have to figure out. So I don't know when we'll learn Tanya next. But next time we learn Tanya, I guess at some time this week, maybe Thursday, I'm thinking, we have to start turning Gimel Tammuz. But next week, or the next time we learn Tanya, the topic on the table is Vayipach. Vayipach ba'afaf nishmas chayim, man denofim techin nofach. Also based on what says in Mamari Chassidus. And I'm going to say the same thing a third time. Just a little different. Okay.